The AGT 2024 stage had seen all kinds of performances, singers, magicians, comedians, but on this particular night, something felt different. The air carried a strange tension, like the atmosphere before a storm. Even the judges sensed it. The audience murmured nervously as the host announced that the next performers came from unexpected places and unimaginable struggles. No one knew that the three upcoming auditions, Manila, Cebu, and Davao, would become the most frightening and legendary acts in the show's history. The stage lights dimmed to a deep blue as the first contestant stepped onto the platform. His name was Manila, a thin man in his late 20s, with sunken eyes and worn-out slippers that slapped against the polished AGT floor. His clothes were torn, his hands dusty, and he carried a small bucket filled with wet cement. The judges exchanged unsure glances. This wasn't the look of a performer, it was the look of someone who had survived something. When Manila finally reached the center, his shaky voice echoed through the theater. "Good evening, I come from a place where the ground is hard, and life is harder," he whispered. He told the judges that he grew up beside an abandoned well, where he learned skills of survival that no one should have to learn. His reaction showed fear, almost as if the memories themselves terrified him. The audience leaned in. The music shifted to a low, rumbling bass as Manila knelt beside his bucket of cement. He dipped both hands inside and pressed the cold mixture onto his forearms, letting it harden rapidly. The cameras zoomed in as the cement gripped his skin like stone shackles. Then he stood and performed a series of contortions and body-bending motions that made everyone cringe. The judges gasped as Manila forced his limbs through shapes that seemed impossible for a human trapped in partially hardened cement. At one point, he sank his hand into a miniature replica of a well he had brought with him. The lights flickered. A hollow echo exploded through the speakers. When he pulled out his arm, it was covered in cracked cement, as if something had grabbed him inside. The audience shivered. Whether it was an illusion or real, no one could tell. But when Manila finished, his chest heaving, the crowd rose to its feet. His poor, terrified expression only made the performance more haunting. He bowed, leaving crumbles of cement behind him as he exited the stage, his audition destined to become one of AGT's most unsettling moments. But the night was only beginning. The next contestant was Cebu, a man with a gaunt face and trembling hands. He walked slowly, leading a skinny cow with ribs visible through its skin. The audience gasped. Animals on stage were rare, and this one looked sacred yet eerie. Cebu's clothes were patched and torn. His reaction showed fear so raw it made even the judges uncomfortable. Cebu introduced himself with a voice that quivered like a loose beam in a storm. He said he came from a poor farming village, where he survived with nothing but this cow, which he called Maya. He explained that Maya was not a pet but a partner in an old, dangerous ritual performed by his ancestors to bring strength during seasons of suffering. The judges leaned closer, unsure whether to be impressed or terrified. The lights dimmed again as Cebu guided the cow to the center. He stepped onto a cement block, balancing himself with arms spread out. The theater filled with a haunting wind sound, though no wind existed. Cebu began chanting softly. Maya, the cow, lowered her head and stomped slowly, deliberately, as if responding to the chant. The ground trembled, likely a stage effect, but the timing was so precise it made the audience's hearts race. Suddenly Cebu jumped off the cement block and landed hard on the stage. He lay still for a moment, and the audience gasped, thinking he was hurt. But then he raised his head, his eyes wide and glowing under the light. He crawled toward the judges on his hands and knees, the cow following behind him with slow, synchronized steps. The audience shrieked. Cebu's expression was filled with poor desperation, fear, and something darker, something primal. The climax came when Cebu placed his hand gently on Maya's forehead, whispering something no microphone could catch. The cow suddenly let out a deep, haunting call that echoed through the theater like a cry from another world. The lights burst into red and white flashes, and the stage filled with smoke. When it cleared, Cebu was kneeling beside Maya, crying openly. Whether from relief or trauma, nobody could be sure. But one thing was clear, his performance had shaken everyone to their core. The final act of the night belonged to Davao. As the lights went pitch black, a faint dripping sound filled the arena, water falling endlessly into a dark abyss. Then a spotlight snapped on, revealing Davao standing alone at the center of the stage. He looked like a man pulled straight out of a nightmare. His clothes were soaked. Dirt smeared his face. His hair dripped water as if he had just climbed out of a well. Even from a distance, the judges could see the poor exhaustion in his expression, eyes sunken, shoulders drooping, hands trembling. Davao spoke in a whisper, explaining that he had been raised beside a cursed well in the mountains. He claimed that anyone who looked inside the well saw not water, but their deepest fear reflected back at them. His performance, he said, would recreate that experience. The audience braced themselves. The stage transformed into a dark forest scene, complete with fog and twisted branches. Davao stepped forward, carrying a tin bucket filled with water from the well he spoke of. He placed the bucket in front of him and began mixing the water with cement using his bare hands. The mixture hissed and bubbled unnaturally. He sculpted strange symbols on the floor, his movements frantic, his body shaking violently as if something inside him was fighting to get out. Behind him, a cow's distant moan echoed through the speakers, not Maya, but a deeper, more painful sound. The crowd looked around nervously, unsure if it was part of the performance or something else entirely. Davao lifted his head, his eyes now cold and distant. "Fear lives where hope dies," he said, his voice cracking. Then he plunged both hands into the bucket and held them there. The stage lights trembled. The audience screamed as the cement inside the bucket began to glow faintly, turning from gray to an eerie pale blue. When Davao pulled his hands out, the cement had hardened instantly, forming jagged stone claws around his fingers. He lifted them to the sky, his face twisted in agony but also triumph. He shouted, and the forest scenery behind him exploded with bright flashes of light, like lightning striking trees. His reaction was raw, desperate, and terrifying. When the lights returned to normal, Davao stood quietly, breathing heavily. The stage floor was marked with the cement symbols he had drawn, and drops of water from his hair created dark spots around him. The audience was silent for several seconds, an unusual moment for AGT, until they finally burst into applause mixed with nervous laughter and relieved cries. Manila's contortions, Cebu's ritual with the cow, and Davao's cursed well performance would go down in history as AGT 2024's scariest auditions, not because of blood or violence, but because each act held a raw, unstoppable fear born from real struggle, real survival, and real desperation. They didn't come to entertain. They came to be seen. They came to be heard. And America would never forget them.